Details showcase the incredible potential of Ballerina and inspire you to unleash your innovation. Before we dive in, let me introduce the main organizing committee behind this competition. This initiative is partly powered by WSO2 and hosted by the IEEE Student Branch of University of Moratuwa in collaboration with the IEEE Computer Society. The IEEE Student Branch at the University of Moratuwa is the leading student branch in Sri Lanka. It's renowned for its dedicated volunteers and supportive academic staff. Ranked first among 22 student branches in Sri Lanka, it was honored with the Most Outstanding Student Branch Award at the IEEE Sri Lanka Section Awards in 2023. With over 700 members, the student branch has successfully organized numerous notable events and competitions, gaining recognition both nationally and globally. In this Accelerating Innovation Challenge, we've teamed up with the visionaries at WSO2, the creators of the elegant and powerful Ballerina programming language. WSO2 stands at the forefront of the digital transformation revolution. Since its inception in 2005 as an open source middleware provider, WSO2 has evolved into a driving force in the application development and identity and access management space. Their commitment extends beyond crafting exceptional open source software. Today, they empower enterprises to forge remarkable digital experiences quickly, securely, and efficiently through a comprehensive suite of technologies accessible as open source. Their impact is far-reaching. Thousands of organizations worldwide, from hundreds of the world's largest corporations and top universities to government entities, harness the power of WSO2's technology to accelerate their digital transformation journey with agility and cost-effectiveness. We are beyond thrilled and honored to have the brilliant minds behind Ballerina to provide a comprehensive overview of Ballerina and the competition details. Let's take this opportunity to learn from the experts. It's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed guest speakers, Mr. Tharik Kanaka and Ms. Maryam Ziyad, Senior Technical Leads at WSO2, to continue the session. Over to you.
Okay. Let me share the screen. Maryam, can you share the screen? I think I have to restart the Zoom. Or if not, I'll just restart.
I think maybe it's because it's already being shared. Or...
Maybe. No. Okay, I just shared it, right?
Yeah, so we can start. Yeah. So hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to see so many of you all joining this session today. So in addition to Tharik, we also have Asma Jabir on our call. She's coordinating the university programs for Ballerina. So yeah, I think we can get started. So this will be like a awareness session, like a brief overview of Ballerina today and also the competition. So yeah, I think we can get started. Next slide, please. Next one. Yeah. So Ballerina is a fully fledged open source programming language that's powered by WSO2. Powered by WSO2 in the sense that it originated and it's being actively developed by WSO2. So to give a bit of background, as it was already mentioned, WSO2 has been in the middleware space and building integration products. And at one point, the team realized that they were doing a lot of configuration, basically most of the time in XML. And it was getting a bit complicated to develop like complex integrations in these traditional products. So they tried to come up with a new alternative for this, which started as the new ESP language. But at one point they realized that you needed a fully fledged programming language, which would actually address this problem well. So that's how Ballerina started, and it's a cloud native programming language optimized for integration. So cloud native in the sense there are network primitives built into the language. So the language itself is aware of concepts like clients to interact with remote services and service objects, services to provide services. The language is aware of this, and it also has language level support for deployment for Docker and Kubernetes kind of things, where it's basically you just add a few annotations and these artifacts are generated for you. And similarly, for things like serverless functions and so on, these are all made fairly straightforward. These are built into the language rather than having to integrate with a separate platform, separate libraries, and so on. So these are all built into the language. In addition to that, the language is also aware of XML, JSON, and other like network-friendly type. It has a network-friendly type system that it is able to make. Bringing all this together, it makes it a really good option for you to develop cloud-native solutions. And also, there's Ballerina is also suitable for a data-oriented programming approach. Data is modeled as data. So depending on depending on your previous experience with different programming language, this may or may not be the case. But often you see, even when you're handling data, you have to work with objects and it gets a bit complicated. Whereas in Ballerina, data is modeled as data. It's modeled as records. We'll see a small example later on. And in addition to that, there's also a powerful SQL-like query syntax, which allows you to work with data in a very convenient manner, but also concisely and in a very intuitive manner. So these are all features that come built in with Ballerina. And I also mentioned like JSON and XML. These are built-in types in the language. So if you're working with network data over the wire, Ballerina is able to directly bind to those types, but also, as we'll see further on, to specific well-defined types that allow you to work more conveniently with these different records and different data from different sources. And Ballerina is also a feature-rich, complete platform. It's not just the core bits we've said. It has a large standard library and connectors, which include support for HTTP, gRPC, GraphQL, WebSocket, and so on, but also for different connectors like a Twilio connector if you want to work with SMS, or like the Twitter X connector and so on. There's a large number of connectors, the Google platform and all of those are all, there's built-in support for connectors, but you can also develop your own connectors and use them within your Ballerina program. So along with that, there's also support for testing, debugging, and package management. Again, like what I mentioned with connectors, we have a central, what we call Ballerina Central, which is like a central repository for packages for developers to develop their packages and share their packages. So this is also a central platform that's available out of the box. So it also has an easy to understand syntax. Where possible, it's been designed to maintain familiarity with C family languages. So for those of you who are coming from such a background, you might find the syntax straightforward to understand. And also I need to mention, like, if some of you might have already worked in these areas, and for some of you, some of the terms I'm using may be new. But Ballerina is also, we believe Ballerina is also a good language to learn with. So if it is new to you, don't worry. We have loads of examples, case studies, use cases, integration samples, and so on. Even if you're someone who is really getting started in this integration space, you can follow these links that we'll share later on, and you should be able to get a fairly good understanding and use that knowledge to then build your solutions during this program. So next slide, please. Yeah, so I'll touch upon a few key features of Ballerina. They're also related to the previous slide. So like I mentioned, it's data-oriented and network aware. So, and it has like built-in support for various data formats, like I mentioned, JSON and XML are built into the type system, but there's also support for like CSV, Tamil, YAML, and so on. So everything that you would need in this modern integration ecosystem, Ballerina supports or is adding support for this. So obviously this space is continuously evolving and Ballerina is continuously evolving to add support for this. And similarly for various network protocols, HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, among others. So all of these are supported out of the box in Ballerina, and you could find it very straightforward to use them to build your solutions. And Ballerina is also concurrent. It supports easy and efficient concurrency with language managed sets. So you don't have to worry too much about this, but the compiler will actually analyze your code and give you warnings if it identifies, okay, this is not something we can call concurrently. So that level of support is also built into the language because we know there are various issues. It's usually like a bit hard to debug and so on. So these were all taken into consideration when developing Ballerina. And there's also like a close correspondence as it is natural to give these network interactions and the concurrent calls with sequence diagrams. So every Ballerina program has a corresponding sequence diagram, as we'll see later on. And that is also kept in mind with every language feature that's being introduced and has been designed so far. And Ballerina is also statically typed and a structural programming language. This is probably one place where it might feel a bit different, depending on the programming language you're usually familiar with. So with statically typed, what we mean is that the type compatibility between constructs is checked at compile time. So it is robust against changes, and that allows it makes it easier to debug, but also gives better tooling experience because we are able to give better completion, suggestions, and so on, because we know at compile time what the exact types are and how they're expected to be used. And the structural part of it is Ballerina has structural typing versus nominal typing, which some of you are probably used to. So what this means is subtyping and relationships like that are defined based on the structure of a value and the type rather than the name. So we do have some nominal typing, but that's only for like object and error types for specific use cases. But generally, Ballerina is structurally typed, and that allows for convenient describing of interfaces, especially when we're handling network data. Sometimes you may get things that you do not expect. So you need to allow for these additional fields, if you may, if it's like a JSON object. So these are also taken into consideration and supported via this structural typing system. So, but then again, if you want to control, these are exactly the fields I want, you're also able to do that with Ballerina's type system. And all of this together make it quite easy to work with network data. But one thing to state with the statical type thing is, obviously when working with JSON data and so on, sometimes we need to have some flexibility. So Ballerina also supports that. So you wouldn't know until runtime if it is of the expected type. But in that case, you would be given an error value. So error handling is also very key, is a very key factor in Ballerina. It's very hard. It's almost impossible to ignore an error in Ballerina. Because again, with this, with the target use cases that we are trying to solve with Ballerina, it's very important that we are not ignoring errors and we are able to say what went wrong where. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is what a simple Ballerina service looks like. So we have this, we've imported the Ballerina HTTP module, and then we say just have a service on this new HTTP listener that's listening on port 8080. And then you have two resources here. For those of you who are familiar, as you may see, that we have this get and put HTTP verbs or methods, whatever you may call them. So the first one is to basically retrieve an employee by ID. So the second int ID part here, it basically gives a path parameter. And then the get resource returns either an employee or an HTTP not found response corresponding to the 404 response. And the second one is an employee update type. So for now, just think of employee and employee input as types that are, like I mentioned previously, like data types. So we'll look into them in a bit. But It's basically the second resource says, tries to update it, but it obviously has a payload now to represent what the update is going to be. And then again, this also can either return an employee if the update is successful, or a bad request if it's like an invalid update request, or an HTTP not found response if that maybe say that there was no employee by that ID. So this is a basic overview of what a service looks like. So this is just the skeleton. But one thing to note here is you can actually generate like an open API specification for those of you who are like familiar with that side of things. So that's also like built into Ballerina, and with Ballerina's VS Code tooling, it's something you can generate just a click of a button. Next slide, please. Yeah. So this is just employee retrieval, that the get method, that's get resource that's been implemented. So you don't have to go into detail here, but just think of it as like we have a table of employee data, and we are trying to retrieve that employee, right? So there we're accessing the employee, and if it is nil, so this employee's parentheses is checking if that employee is not there. It's returning a not found response. If not, it will call another function and return the transformed employee. So you don't really have to go into detail here, but the thing I wanted to emphasize is that this code might look familiar for those of you who come from a C family, who are familiar with languages in the C family. So we've tried to maintain familiarity and consistency wherever possible. So which is why it might look like code that you know, or like code that you can easily understand. So next slide, please. Yeah, so I'll also briefly touch upon structural typing because I previously mentioned it. So on the left-hand side here, we have the first two types. So this is how a type is defined in Ballerina, and a record is like a special kind of maps. So with a map, you can have any key value pair, right? So any key, but with and the type of all the members in the map are of a specific type. They all belong to the same type. Whereas with a record, you can be more specific and say this field must be there, or like optionality we'll see later on. But if the field has to be there, plus you can also specify individual types for the different fields. So here we say ID has to be an integer, name has to be a string, and so on. So this is where a record becomes very convenient. And then if you think back to, can we go back a slide? Yeah, maybe the post, yeah, one more, the put, one more, yeah. So here, if you look at employee input and employee, these also have that specific record definitions, right? And when you get like this corresponds to JSON payload. So when you get the JSON payload, the language itself passes that JSON payload as an employee input record and gives it to you. Say in case there's some type mismatch or a required field is missing or so on, this resource won't even be invoked. So the language will handle it for you and respond with an appropriate status code to say it was not in the expected structure. So similarly, when you just return an employee record here, the language will handle setting it as a JSON payload. And you don't have to, you can still work with JSON, but you don't really have to do it if you are working with the types. The benefit again, working with types is, like I said, when you know statically that this is going to be of this type, you can directly access fields. With that, the compiler will give you type checking and so on. So this is very convenient and leaves little room for it. So can we go back to the previous? Next. Yeah. So we have permanent employee and contractual employee here. So if you see, compare these two records, some of the fields are common, ID, name, and salary. They are of the same types for this example. And then permanent employee has two additional fields, string department and org employee number, whereas the contractual employee has a contract duration in months. And now if you look at employee core record at the bottom, it has those common ID, name, and salary fields. And if you look at the syntax after record, open curly brace, you'd see that the syntax is a little bit different from contractual employee or permanent employee and employee core. So with this pipe sign, the first two records are what we call effectively closed records, meaning these records can have only the fields defined here. Whereas with the employee core record, it says it has to have these 3 mandatory fields and they have to be of these specific types, but it can have any additional data type fields. So if you think of permanent employee, it meets this criteria and it has 2 additional fields, department and org employee number, but those belong to the data type. I'll not elaborate a lot, but you can consider them as belonging to the data type. So permanent employee is a subtype of employee core. Similarly, if you take contractual employee, ID, name, and salary are present and are of the expected types. And you have contract duration in months, again, which is an integer which belongs to the data type. So contractual employee is also a subtype of employee. Now, if you look at the table we have, so a table is also data type in Ballerina. So it's similar to a map in some ways, but you can have an ID that isn't a key that isn't a string. And of course, there are other benefits with a table that we'll go into later on, but not today. So this is a table of employee core. So you can add anything that belongs to employee core here. And as we've seen previously, permanent employee and contractual employee are subtypes of employee core. So both these value additions are valid additions. So that's a brief intro to structural typing with Ballerina. So yeah, we can move on to the next slide. Yes. Yeah. So previously I mentioned the sequence diagram correspondence, and there's every Ballerina program, there's corresponding sequence diagram. So this is a one-to-one thing. It's generated so via VS Code. You can also try it out. You just click on this button and it opens up the diagram for you. And it's also, it's a two-way thing. So you can either edit the code, it'll be reflected in the diagram, or you can actually edit the diagram and it'll be reflected on the code. So both ways work, and depending on familiarity and preferences, people may choose to pick either approach. But the key thing here is if you look at the diagram, even if you delve into before you delve into the code, you can get a brief understanding of what happens in this code. So if you look at this, we have like a GitHub lifeline and a Google Sheets lifeline. So the first thing that happens is we have a get repository pulls. So from GitHub, we are getting the pull requests of a particular repository. And then we're updating a Google Sheet. So we haven't even looked at the code yet, but by looking at this diagram, we know we have an overview understanding of what's happening in the code. So we'll not go into the code here, but if you check the code, that's pretty much what we've done in the code. So this is there's one-to-one parity with the sequence diagram view. Next slide, please. Yeah, and this is the service designer view. So we went through the previous service with 2 resources, right? We had a get and a put. So that one was actually like code written manually, but you don't really have to do that. The skeleton part of it, at least the skeleton part of it, you can also use the service designer to do this. So you can select the HTTP method, you can give the path, you can give a payload, additional parameters, and so on. So this is also supported out of the box. You just have to install the VS Code plugin, and you can also try it out. Next slide, please. So data transformation is also a key requirement when it comes to these integration solutions. So if, for example, you may get a request with some payload, some JSON payload that you want to transform to some other format expected by another backend service. Before you make that call, retrieve the response and then respond back to the original caller. And similarly, it can be you get some response from a backend, you want to transform it to some format expected by the front end and respond back with it. So this data mapper view, what we call the data mapper view, is also, again, something with a one-to-one mapping between the code and this particular view. So you can, again, modify the mapping either via the code or via the diagram. But it also gives a very convenient overview to see what kind of mapping is going on. So the code actually here is on your left-hand side, around line number 30, that enroll person function is what we're looking at. So while you can look at the code, this view also gives you a very good understanding. And even when it comes to things like documentation, it can be very helpful to understand what's going on. Next slide, please. Data persistence is also another key feature. So I'm sure most of y'all have worked with databases at some point. So we have, Ballerina has this persist feature, which is like a ORM-like support with Ballerina. So so we have a set of types which correspond to the data stored in a database, for example. And we are able to get this the entity relationship diagram via these type definitions, via just these type definitions. So this is generated from the code. And you can go both ways. You can start with your code and then have, say, the SQL queries, DDL queries generated from your types, or you can go the other way. We also have introspection support. If you already have a database, you can just point to that and have all of this be generated for you. Once you have, coming back to the persist feature itself, once you have these types, you just have to work with the types and the functions made available via these generated types. And you don't have to worry about the underlying SQL queries or anything like that. So it's very convenient. You just need to, you can just work with the types and whatever that is generated for you. Next slide, please. We also have the architectural view. So this is more of when you have multiple components, multiple different services talking to each other. This also gives you a good overview of what's happening. So here we have the front end, which is an HTTP service talking to multiple gRPC services, which in turn may talk to other gRPC services or any other service. And then we have one of them talking to a different endpoints, Gmail endpoint. So via this view, you get a clear understanding of the multiple components that are in your solution. So with the services view, next slide, please. We also have a resources view and a types view. So we will not go into them in detail. So the next one is the types view. So this gives you the overview between the resources, the relationships, and the type, the relationships between the different types. So this was a quick overview of all the graphical features available in Ballerina. It doesn't necessarily mean that we expect you to use all of it. Obviously, it will be very convenient for you to use them, depending on obviously what you're building. Some of them might not apply to your particular solution. But we hope that by trying out these things, you'll understand it's easy to actually use these resources, use these generated resources to maybe, whether it's presenting or like documenting your solution. So yeah, so that's a quick overview of the language bits and also the graphical component. Over to you, Tharik.
Yeah. Thank you, Maryam. So I'll just quickly go through the sample use case. So this is to give you some idea what kind of thing has to be done. So it is not exactly this is what to be done. So this is just like a guidance. Right? So like if you take a very simple scenario for this particular hackathon, we want you to implement something like a distributed application. So whereas we want to have one application with some business logic, you could like expose some API. So as Maryam has shown you, you could even use something like REST API, or even use some other protocol as well. And also you could like implement some UI application. So it could be even mobile app or even a web app, whatever the thing you prefer to have based on your scenario. So when it comes to technologies, you could use for the mobile app or the web app, whatever the UI app you are going to work, you could use. You have like complete freedom to use anything or any technology you are confident with. For the backend service or the business logic service, we want you to use the Ballerina. Right? And again, as I mentioned earlier, the API could be REST or any other protocol based on that. Right? And also like when it comes to this business logic, you could have like multiple approaches as well. So as I mentioned earlier, like very simple distributed application like this business logic with the UI application. It could be a web or mobile app, or even there's something called microservices, which you might have heard. Like you like break the service into multiple services and have separate APIs, whereas UI may work with several things. And also your use case may end up like connecting to a database, or maybe connecting to some other third-party service as well. So similar with the microservice as well. So these things are actually some possibilities of the application. So we are not like saying like this is the exact thing needs to be done, but this is just to give you some rough idea what needs to be done. So all of these things are depending on the whatever the scenario you are picking, right? So these are some scenarios we just included. So as I said over and over again, so these are again to guide you. So not to say like to stick to these. So you could have some API integration scenario, something like the with the assistant application, or some microservice application, or some integrating into some legacy application, or some alert system with some event-driven integration. So these are just some scenarios, but again, you could have your own scenario, something suits for you. So what needs to be done for the hackathon? So as I mentioned earlier, you need to implement a distributed application, so using Ballerina and some other technologies. And we actually WSO2, even the Ballerina, we are an open source company, so most of our sources are open source. So we encourage open source. So this particular application, we want to make it as open source project, and we want you to upload it to GitHub as a public repository, right? And so that is the first task. So implement it, upload it to GitHub, and we want you to create a 5 to 10 minutes demonstration video, and again upload it to YouTube. So both of them become public. And finally, we want you to like submit both repository URL and YouTube URL for us. So that is the task you need to be done. And like additionally, you could like feel free to share social media post or an article highlighting the potential of your work, or the impact of your work, and also your team experience as well. So that's some additional thing you could do. So what we really believe is like you could like create open source stuff, and also it's necessary to bring it to the community as well. So the last part is something like that. So then when it comes to evaluation and rewards, so we high level we have like identify some areas. So we will have some portion like when you are doing the evaluations, we will like have some portion given for the innovation, which is your originality and creativity of the idea, and then the impact. So it could be a potential business value or a social value, and how it's practically done. So those two sections you get some portions. And of course, since it's a Ballerina hackathon, we want you to like use the Ballerina based on the Ballerina usage and how you have used Ballerina. There'll be some portion of the marks will be given there. And finally, like whatever the things you have done, you had like present it clearly about your problem and the solution. And so actually most of you may not familiar with Ballerina and so on, but no need to worry. So we could like always like as I mentioned earlier, we are open source project. So you could like always connect to our Discord channel or a Stack Overflow or other social media handles as well. So if you have any technical question and so on, please feel free to raise that question on the Stack Overflow. Or if you have any discussion, please join our Ballerina server, and there are separate channels to discuss about technical issues and so on. So you have like complete freedom to like join this one, and our team is happily like there to help you out. And also like if you visit our website like ballerina.io, there's a /learn page, and there are Ballerina by examples. So there are a bunch of examples which has been even like explained by Maryam as well. And yet again, like the community is there. So if you have any technical issue and so on, feel free to join them and raise those questions, right? Okay, that's it from our side. Any questions or anything ask to answer? I just stop the sharing. Any questions? So there's one question in the chat. Okay. So from our side, that's it. So over to the team, to organization committee. So we will be happy to answer the questions at the end as well.
We'll have the Q&A session at the end of this session. And thank you so much, Mr. Tharik and Ms. Maryam. We appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge and expertise with us. So moving forward, let's map out the exciting journey ahead. And here's a breakdown of the key dates and deadlines for the Innovate with Ballerina competition. The journey of innovation began on September 1st as we opened registrations for this exciting competition, and we've already seen an overwhelming response. We're thrilled to share that over 300 teams and 1,000 plus participants are already registered. It's truly inspiring to witness the passion and enthusiasm of so many students eager to dive into the world of ballerina. And today, at the awareness session on September 16th, we are thrilled to see even more of you joining us. And if you haven't registered yet, don't miss out on this incredible opportunity. And we're thrilled about the upcoming workshop 1 on September 26th, where participants will explore the exciting world of ballerina. This workshop, along with the release of the case study, will inspire innovative solutions and set the stage for a successful competition. The submission window swings open on September 30th, and you'll have the opportunity to further refine your skills at Workshop 2, which will focus on advanced ballerina content. Polish your submissions and ensure they're finalized by October 13th, the submission deadline. The culmination of this accelerated journey awaits on November 2nd, where we'll gather for the award ceremony to celebrate the creativity and dedication of our delegates. This is your chance to showcase your talent and passion for technology. Prepare to innovate and let the journey continue. And we are excited to reveal the exciting prizes awaiting the winners of this competition. Your hard work and innovation will be rewarded handsomely. So here's what's for grabs. For the first place, we have a grand prize of 150,000 rupees. And for the second place, we have a fantastic prize of 100,000 rupees. And for the third place, a well-deserved reward of 75,000 rupees. The top 10 teams will not only bask in the glory of their achievement, but will also receive exclusive gift hampers from WSO2, a testament to their exceptional skills and dedication. But that's not all. For those securing positions from 4th to 10th, a prize of 10,000 rupees awaits each team, acknowledging their impressive efforts. Beyond the thrill of competition, your efforts will be recognized. Every valid submission earns you an e-certificate from WSO2, a testament to your dedication and learning. But remember, the true prize lies in the journey of innovation itself. This is your chance to stretch your skills, collaborate with your peers, and make a real impact with ballerina. So don't miss out on this amazing opportunity to showcase your skills and earn a recognition. We'll be dropping the registration link in the chat now, so be sure to sign up and join the competition. Before you assemble your dream team, let's go over the essential guidelines for team formation. Teams are required to have a minimum of 3 members and a maximum of 4 members. It is essential for all interested teams to complete their registration for the competition before the designated deadline. Late registrations will not be accepted under any circumstances. Once the registration period concludes, teams will not be permitted to make any changes to their member roster. To ensure a level playing field, each participant is allowed to register with only one team. Joining multiple teams is strictly prohibited. Each team must have a unique team name that distinguishes them from other participants. Additionally, each team is required to designate one member as the team leader. We kindly request that current WSO2 interns refrain from participating in this competition to ensure fairness and organizational integrity. And now it's time to take a moment to express our appreciation to the esteemed speakers of the day. On behalf of the IEEE Student Branch of the University of Moratuwa, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to the brilliant minds behind ballerina. We extend our sincere gratitude to our special guest, Ms. Asma Jabir, Technical Lead at WSO2, for her valuable contributions to this event. And in recognition of their exceptional contributions, we honorably invite Mr. Tharik, Kanaka, and Ms. Maryam Ziyad to accept our digital tokens of appreciation, a testament to their profound impact on our event. Thank you so much. Your collaboration and support have been pivotal in bringing this competition to life. We are excited to witness the groundbreaking ideas that will emerge from this event, and we look forward to continuing our partnership with you in shaping the future of technology in Sri Lanka. So We covered a lot of ground today, but we know you might still have some burning questions. If you have any questions now, feel free to send them through the chat or you can ask directly. We want to hear all your questions about Ballerina, the competition, or anything else that sparked your curiosity today.
Shall we answer them verbally? So if there are some questions in the chat.
Yes, yes, sure. You can answer the questions in the chat now. And if there are more, I will direct them to you.
Yeah. Okay. So first question, there's can a beginner into programming do this? I think yes, of course. As like even Maryam explained, like Ballerina is a language anyone could like easily learn, and our purpose of it to make it easy as possible. So it should be like even a beginner, we expect them to do it and so on. So that's the first question.
Just to add to that, so on the website, we also have like guided tutorials. So these are like step-by-step things that will not only introduce you to Ballerina, but also some of the concepts in these specific areas that you want to learn.
So there's another question like sent to me saying, is there any recommended files and folder structure? So actually there's a Ballerina has a project structure. So if you like, we will provide for these questions, we will provide the reference as well. So there's a project structure for the Ballerina project. So you could like follow that. I think we could like, Maryam, we could like put the links as well. No? We'll put those guide like the references to that place as well. Then there was another question. Okay, I think we could answer. Can we integrate Ballerina language with Python for AI ML application? If so, explain how they collaborate effectively. I think like yeah, the answer is yes. And I think we, as far as I remember, we had like some use case for that as well for the AI to like exactly what has been done. I think.
Yeah, we have a bunch of AI connectors also. So
yeah.
if something you don't really have to integrate Python for, like there are some things you can also do via like native Ballerina itself.
Yeah. So yeah. So I'll just like yes, through the connectors we could like connect, and I will just put some use case for that as well. What other questions? Are there already use cases for Ballerina? We have a page for use cases, so I'll just put, so we are keeping adding the use cases. So we have some use cases there, so I will put that link as well here.
We also have some case studies that we
yes.
That's right. Sorry.
Yeah, we'll put that as well. So there's like yes, some case studies. We'll put that URL as well. Yes. So there's another question. Is it like creating a whole application using this Ballerina programming that is ready to be deployed? It's not the whole, yeah. So it's actually it's not the whole application. So if you are creating some application with UI and so on, you could use some UI technology to create the UI part, but backend services needs to be implemented, or the backend business logic has to be implemented by using Ballerina, and you could like expose an API, whereas you could integrate that UI with that. But of course, there could be a scenario where some of your ideas may not have a UI as well, right? Some could be a purely Ballerina program which might have some integration use case and so on. So it could be like that. So for an example, sometimes like this is some example, there could be some scenario where you read from a Google Sheet and send some notifications to something like that, or some business case using some integration like that, which doesn't have to have a UI. So you could like it's always based on your scenario. Anything to add there for that question?
And we have another question. What kinds of limitations are expected in this project for the competition?
What kind of limitations? I don't see any limitation. I think like when it comes to technology wise or the scenario wise, like you could like go beyond any point. Like the only limitation or the only condition we had was like there has to be some part, some service or something like that has to be implemented by Ballerina. But of course, the other parts we don't want to put any limitation on that because like what we believe is like if you have some idea and some business problem to be solved, if you put some limitation and kind of thing, so it will restrict at some point. So you could like go beyond any limitation. I hope I answered that question. I don't know.
And another question we have is, will there be multiple case studies or a singular common case study that all the teams should work towards in their own way?
I think like we want the team has to be come up with an idea or a case studies, or we use the word use cases, and so the teams may have their own use case or the case study. So we want them to implement. So we are not giving any case studies or the list of topics this needs to be implemented. We want you to come up with something and implement that. The reason for that is we are confident that these integrations problems could be solved by using Ballerina very easily. So if you have a good idea kind of thing, we want you to like use this effort and use this competition, and even afterwards you could like continue that project and so on. So you could come up with your own idea and continue like that.
And again, we have, could you please give us any core skills or technology that we should know for this competition?
So so I think if you have uh, like programming skills and some up to certain level, you could like easily grab and so on. And yes, there are a bunch of protocols and so on. What we want to we will be doing some 2 workshops, so we will be covering most of the things. Like even Maryam showed a lot of a lot of possibilities there and so on. So we are expecting in next workshops to cover them. uh, I don't I personally don't think there has to be this thing. Anything could be learned and do it. So I don't think if there's any let's say if you feel like any question is there related to any protocol with Ballerina and so on, you could always use our Discord channel or Stack Overflow and raise the questions. So we will help you out on that thing. So anything to add that to that part?
Like technology wise, it will more not depend on what you're trying to build, right? So, and I think that's also like time to learn in that front, even if you want to explore something that you're totally new to. And yeah, if you have any questions, just feel free to raise on any of the channels. We'll have the subject matter experts, and we'll also try to help as much as possible. But yeah, technology wise, it's not necessary to like know something really well to take part in this competition.
And another exciting question we have is, can Ballerina work with other backend technologies like Python or Node.js? And if so, how?
You want to answer that question? Or
Yeah, so we have the current implementation of Ballerina that you will also be working with is implemented in Java. So we have Java interoperability support we have, but when it comes to other languages or technologies, generally you could have it as a service, and then you could have you can have a client or something from Ballerina making calls to that. And alternatively, depending on what you need to call, we also have the OS execute command where you can point to a specific, you can run a specific, maybe like Python script or so on, depending on the requirement. But in terms of like native support, it's Java interoperability at the moment.
And always there's API integration is there. So it's like this. So now in a world, most of the applications are distributed. So there could be so many languages, so many technologies. They are like small applications, and they expose an API. Most of the time it's the REST API. So Ballerina is designed to communicate with those and so on. So it is basically if some language or technology expose some common API, we could always connect with that and so on. And like our target is we know there's something called integration developer. So that's the person who is actually integrating with multiple systems and so on. That possibility is also there.
And we have some questions about the databases, like which database can we use, or like can we use MongoDB as the database with Ballerina?
Yes, we could like for this scenario you could use any database if you are confident with. have like connectors. We have, like I mentioned, like we have something called Ballerina Central, which has like this libraries or connectors included. So we have like connector for MongoDB, Redis, and everything. So new days, like new databases and so on. So all things are there. You could use them as well.
Okay, and another question we have is, even Ballerina has their own architecture, and for this competition, is it required to use that architecture, or can we use our own architecture?
So architecture, I think I don't get the but which part the Ballerina has the architecture. So I think it's talking about the scenarios we put inside the slides. So I hope I will assume it's the case, but that is those are just sample references. You could have your own architecture as long as you are using Ballerina. That's fine. So again, like based on your scenario, you could use any architecture you prefer, and you could, like as I mentioned earlier, you could use any technology to integrate with Ballerina as well.
Yeah, they're asking actually about the folder structure.
Folder structure. So it's like this. It's Ballerina. If it's a Ballerina project, it has its own structure. So it's very easy. Like you could have multiple modules and so on. We will do the first workshop on the structure and so on. No need to worry about that. So for the Ballerina project, you could have that structure. But let's say in a case like there's a we mentioned like you have to use multiple applications. So let's say you're using React and Ballerina and so on. You have the option to have a monorepo or repository with both projects together, and you could have like outside folder structure, whatever you like. So inside that there could be one folder which has the Ballerina sources. So which inside that you could have the Ballerina project structure. That is one possibility I would see.
Okay, and I think this will be our last question. And is it possible to develop packages for Ballerina? He's asking not for the project. He's just excited to know about.
Yes, of course. You could create packages for Ballerina and you could push it to the central. So we have the Ballerina Central, which is like a package registry, which is like Maven Central or NPM and so on. We have Ballerina Central. You could always, if there's some missing thing and so on, you could like always create a package and push it to the Ballerina Central. And that we highly recommend, not for this competition, as open source community and so on, we highly recommend people to come up with those packages and push it to the Ballerina Central.
Yes, and we have just one last question. If we develop front end with HTML, how can we integrate Ballerina with that?
So I think there was another question as well. React, can we use the React as well? So I think I will answer all the things together. So for the front end, you could have any technology, React, Angular, or HTML and CSS and so on. So your UI logics will be there, and from Ballerina, you could create a service. You could create a REST service and expose that REST endpoint. From, let's say it's an HTML case, you could like, let's say if you're using HTML, pure HTML, CSS with JavaScript, you could like simply talk to that REST endpoint by using JavaScript, and like so by default it's using JSON and so on. You could like communicate with JSON messages. You could like integrate with the REST endpoint. So most of the applications happening like that, you could do that way.
Okay, and I think that's all the questions that we got. One last question: should we submit a project documentation as well with the solution building using Ballerina?
Yes, yes. So we from as the mandatory things, we want to have the source code and some video about the demonstration of the thing. But additionally, of course, you could be, if we are willing to put documentation, you could always include them along with the project. I think nowadays people include the documentation inside as README markdown files inside the GitHub repository. That possibility is also there, which is very good in a way. Like if you could like put a documentation as well.
And another question about the UI. Do we need to implement the whole project or just the UI?
So we want you to create a complete project with UI and functionality with the backend and so on. And for the UI, of course, you could like use any technology, UI technology, what you are comfortable with. But for the business logic, we want to implement in Ballerina, and we want that to be integrated with the UI. So one thing, like I think we will like we are planning the workshop one, so we will give some idea like nowadays, like the application architecture has been changed. So you might wonder why we are asking to make it distributed application. There's a reason for that. The application architecture has been changed over the years. Early days, the applications were monolithic applications. Then it was broken into multiple tier application or 3 tier applications. Then we have microservices and so on. So it has evolved a lot. So Ballerina is actually answering like that problem as well. So I think we in the next workshop we will little bit talk about how this application architecture has changed and how the deployment architecture has changed. Like we are talking about Kubernetes, Docker, and so on. So we will just give some rough idea on that, and we will give the exact reason we want to like separate these two logics separate.
Yes, thank you so much. And another last question. We have actually lots of questions coming up. And another one is, what are the key areas that you guys will look overall? Like product idea or like the code structures that we use, like MVC, etc. Or any other key areas?
Yeah. So I think as I mentioned in the slides, so we have some like when you're giving the score, we have some breakdown. So we will give some portion for your uh, uh, idea and this impact and the idea we will give for the that part we will give some portion. And of course, since you are using Ballerina, based on Ballerina usage, we will give some portion. So those two together, there will be portions like that. So for let's say the MEC part is if you're creating a front end with MEC and so on, that is part of it. So we will take that as the completeness of the application, which has UIs and so on. You have used MEC, and of course you will like, but you have to like always separate out the business logic into the Ballerina service and integrate your MEC app for the front end app with that. Uh, Other than that, we don't have any other key areas when it comes to giving evaluating the submissions.
Yes. And yes, I think that's all our questions. And if there are any questions remained, our OC will answer you. Don't
Yeah.
worry. Okay, and thank you so much, Mr. Tharik and Ziyad, Ms. Maryam. So before we wrap up, let's capture this moment with a virtual group photo. And if you're comfortable, please turn on your camera so we all can see each other's smiling faces. So if you don't have the background, don't worry. You can just turn on your videos and put the photo. I think we need permission to turn on the videos for the participants. Can someone check on it? Right. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you all so much for joining us today and for your enthusiasm for the Innovate with Ballerina competition. We're truly excited to see the amazing projects you'll create. A special thanks to our speakers for sharing their insights and expertise, inspiring us all to push the boundaries of what's possible with Ballerina. Remember, innovation thrives on curiosity and willingness to explore. So go out there, experiment, and let your creativity shine. We can't wait to witness your brilliance. And thank you again. Good evening and goodbye.